I wonder, as Gina was reading our first gospel lesson this morning, if any of you had a conversation going on in your head that went something like this. Isn't there supposed to be a little boy in the story? Wasn't there a little boy who gave his lunch to Andrew? Didn't the disciples get those loaves and fishes from the lunch of that little boy? For many of us, this story of Jesus feeding a crowd of more than 5,000 people hinges on the selfless act of a little boy. We have made him the hero of this story. We celebrate his faith. Ignoring his own growling stomach, he gives his lunch to Andrew, who gave it to Jesus, who blessed it and broke it and shared it with a weary and hungry multitude. We celebrate his generosity. He gives it all 5 barley cakes, the whole 2 fish. He doesn't squirrel any away for himself. It's not much. He knows it, but he shrugs his shoulders and he turns it over to Andrew. The little boy becomes our hero. He shared his meager lunch. And just look what Jesus went and did with it. The little boy becomes our inspiration, for we too hope that Jesus will take our meager gifts and work a miracle with them, feeding millions and millions of weary and hungry people in our world today, or at the very least, feed the thousands of men and women and children in our Purchase region that are hungry. All 4 gospel writers recall for us this miraculous event. But Mark doesn't remember a little boy, nor does Matthew, nor does Luke. Only John remembers a little boy, and he wrote the last gospel and not the first, like Mark. This morning, if possible, I want to pry your eyes off the little boy and the inspiration that he gives us. And I want us to focus for just a little while on Jesus, the true center of this story, the real hero of this story. Let's focus for a moment on his compassion. Jesus didn't deal with hypothetical situations. He dealt with real people, real situations, real human circumstances. First, let's note that Jesus wants to get away from the crowds with his disciples. After all, they have just returned from this mission that he has sent them on, and they have much to share with him. He wants to hear about their experiences. But they are tired, they are weary, and the crowd keeps coming in such numbers that they can't even grab a bite to eat. So Jesus suggests that they go off to a deserted place where perhaps for just a little while they can be by themselves alone. You see, Jesus deeply understands that caring for people can be extremely exhausting. But he also realizes that sometimes rest from that weariness and that exhaustion is just not in the cards. The crowd somehow figured out where Jesus was going. Jesus went by boat, they ran around the shore, and when Jesus and the disciples arrived, this massive crowd is already there waiting. And Mark, in very plain language, tells us that Jesus looked at them and he was filled with compassion for them. He looked at them and they appeared to him to be like sheep without a shepherd. And so he began to teach many things to these shepherdless sheep. Yes, sometimes it's simply not an option to get away to rest, to get away when it comes to caring compassionately for other people. After a while, the disciples who are weary and hungry themselves take their own stab at being compassionate. They approach Jesus with this suggestion. Lord, as you can see, it's getting really late. And this is a deserted place. There's not a town or a village for miles. We think it would be wise if you considered offering the benediction and sending these folks away so that they can find something to eat on their way home. But Jesus, who after all is trying to teach shepherdless sheep and dull apostles something, says to them, you give them something to eat. And immediately these disciples assess the situation and determine that it is absolutely impossible for them to feed this crowd of people. You see, above all, these disciples are realists. They know what can't be done. They know there's not enough money in the budget. It would take at least 200 days of all 12 of them working hard to have enough money to buy enough bread for this large crowd. And if they had the money, they don't know where they could find a supplier who could deliver hundreds of loaves of bread to be broken to feed this large crowd. They're realists. This just can't be done. And so it seems to me that we haven't learned very much over the last 2,000 years. Jesus focuses on the needs of people. We tend to focus on the frustrations and the challenges of dealing with people. Jesus sees weary, hungry people. We see a crowd of 5,000 men plus women and children, and we throw up our hands. Jesus knows hungry people need food, but we find ourselves paralyzed by all the obstacles we see inherent in our task to feed hungry people. Jesus says, let's see what you've got for us to work with. While we have convinced ourselves that there is never quite enough to deal with the difficult problems of life. And so we continue to hope that somehow Jesus will take our meager efforts and do something miraculous. That somehow Jesus will take what we have chosen to offer Him and do something beyond our imaginations. We keep focusing on how insurmountable the problem is. And I think this is why we get stuck when it comes time to talk about hunger. Hunger in our world, hunger in our nation, hunger in our state, hunger in our region, hunger within the shadow of this steeple. I won't quote a bunch of statistics to you today. Because I think we've all heard them often enough to know that there are millions of people in our world today who are hungry and who face hunger every single day. I think we know that there are hundreds of thousands of children who are dying from hunger-related illnesses across the globe. Even here in Paducah, in our little part of the world, there must be thousands of people who are in need of a meal at least once a day. When you consider the number of meals prepared by Martha's Vineyard, by the community kitchen, by senior citizens, by River City Mission, and countless other churches and organizations. There must be thousands of people in Paducah in need of food so that they can place a meal on their table. If you look at the food pantries at Paducah Cooperative Ministry and the Family Service Center and Salvation Army, and who knows how many churches have food pantries. In schools across our entire region, children are eating free lunches and free breakfasts because so many of the children in those schools live at the poverty line or below it. For us, just like those early disciples, it does appear impossible for us to feed such a huge crowd of folks, even in our little part of the world. But unlike Jesus, it's hard for us to see hunger in the faces of the people we meet and know. So we do the best we can to acknowledge the realities of hunger. We say our prayers for those who are hungry and those who are dying of hunger. And we hope, above all hope, that somehow God will do something miraculous and feed more and more people with what we can spare, or at least with what we remember to share. And so the little boy with his lunch bag becomes our hope, becomes our source of comfort. We give something, and we hope God will do something miraculous with it. The food on our altar this morning symbolizes what we as a congregation share with Paducah Cooperative Ministry and family services throughout the year. We simply have to remember to pick up an extra can or two in the grocery store and bring it here to the church with us on Sunday or Wednesday or any other time, and a Sunday school class will gather it and deliver it to PCM and to family services. We bring our lunch of loaves and fishes. Once a month, like on this Thursday evening, we feed the folks finding shelter and a meal at River City Mission. Usually there are between 40 and 60 men, women, and children. And we have been serving and preparing this meal for 20 years now. And in real dollars, it costs us about $3,000 each year to do that, along with the countless hours that volunteers share in that ministry. Each Wednesday evening, we bag up food for the weekend for 25 children who attend Clark School next door. This is what we call our backpack ministry. It's not a backpack. It's a plastic bag. It's full of food and snacks to tie a hungry boy or girl, or maybe a hungry mother or father, tied them over the weekend. Some Apple Jacks, some orange juice, some grape juice, some ravioli, some Rice Krispie treats, some Vienna sausage. Oh no. Romaine noodles, we learned Wednesday, they have no real nutritional value, but all food pantries ask for them. A nutrition bar. Doesn't sound like much, does it? But last year, at Clark School, a little girl who takes one of these bags home with her every Friday brought it to show and tell, and opened her bag and laid out every item and shared with her class why she liked the food she ate over the weekend. In 2014, this ministry cost us about $2,000. And our church budget, if you look down the world missions category, you will find that we send away $4,000 each year to feed hungry people around the world. People we don't even know, people we will never see across the world and across our nation. And then beyond that, in designated giving, you give another $2,000 to $3,000 every year to do that again. But this morning, at least from where I sit, I say to myself, surely we are capable of doing more. The words of Jesus keep poking at me and hounding me when he says, "Very truly I say to you that the one who believes in me will also do the works I do. And in fact, they will do greater works than I have done." Very truly, I tell you that the one who believes in me will also do the works that I do, and in fact, will do greater works than I have done. Is it really possible that knowing that Jesus fed 5,000 people plus women, 5,000 men plus women and children, is it really possible that that could mean that we could feed 5,000 people across our city? And I wonder today if there are other ways to address the realities of hunger and hungry people than giving away food and preparing meals. Is there some way to reach down to the deep causes of hunger that don't call for us to be securing and preparing food, but call us to engage hungry people in redemptive ways as our neighbors? They're not people we're giving a handout to, but they are our neighbors. And the Father in heaven calls us to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. What might we do if we saw the faces of hungry people rather than simply picking up groceries for hungry people or giving money for hungry people? Surely, somehow, some way, we are capable of much more. If the little boy is our hero, then surely we are capable of doing more. Perhaps we need a dose of his faith and trust in Jesus. For surely we are capable of more. For we have many more resources. And we are adults, not children. Jesus seems to be saying that if we would only stretch ourselves a bit, knowing Him and knowing what He has done, that we could do much more with what we have, if only we were open to stretching ourselves a bit. There is no solace in having a great deal. The little boy in the story in John didn't have much. 5 barley loaves, barley cakes, and 2 fish. He didn't have much to lose. But the stakes become higher and higher when you are capable of doing so much more. And it is quite tempting, as people who have more than we need, to deny that we are capable of doing more. By denying our potential, we find a way of justifying what we have done. You see, it's always amazing to me what happens outside the church. It's always amazing to me what people are willing to do and sacrifice when they are engaged in endeavors beyond the walls of the great church of Jesus Christ. Out there, men and women see problems as challenges to be overcome. They see obstacles that can be confronted. When someone says to them, "It can't be done," they are determined to prove that it can be done. If there is a business person who is a good business person, who has a good business and it needs funds or resources to expand when his or her are limited, we all know what they do. Passionate about their vision, they share their vision, and they go out and find partners to help them in their endeavors. Literature is full of stories. I think they're tragic stories, because they're stories of people who knew they had talent and yet failed to use it. Knew that they could accomplish things, but never risked getting into the fray. There are scores and scores of people who either deny or hide, or perhaps are just refuse to acknowledge that they are quite intelligent and wise, creative and visionary. Or that they are people who can put things into action and make things work and push things forward. But they bury all of this in the earth because they're afraid that they might be asked to use it for something greater than the fulfillment of their own ambitions. I am aware that the church is probably the burying ground of talents, intelligence, and wisdom of so many, many people. We bury our talents in the church, and they are used for no one. And I expect that's the reason we keep waiting to experience God's power and presence when He will do something miraculous and thus get our attention. So today, as we try to become more aware of hunger around us and in our world, I'm going to ask you to do a couple of simple things. First of all, after I pronounce the benediction, if you choose, you can go downstairs and eat lunch. It's not going to be an elaborate lunch. I can assure you you'll be hungry when you finish it. I can assure you that it will not be tasty, that it will not satisfy your palate, and there probably won't be enough in your bowl to satisfy you. I don't even know that if many of you go downstairs, there'll even be enough to feed all of us, so some of us will have to go on home having nothing to eat. I asked you to go down and eat this simple meal or go home without eating, just to stand in solidarity a few moments with your and my hungry brothers and sisters across the globe and in our city. And to ponder for a while what it would be like if that small bowl was all that you would eat for this whole day and perhaps for tomorrow. And then I'm going to ask Gina to come and take a picture of the altar symbolizing our little boy's lunch. And every day this coming week, I'm going to come in at noon and take a picture of this table. I'll have them posted on our Facebook so those of you who do that, can see what happens. And we'll just see if God can do anything with it. Or if Friday at noon, it sits on this table just like it is on this Sunday at noon. And finally, either while you eat out of that small bowl in a little while, or while you go about the week, I'm going to ask you to ponder if perhaps you would be a part of us doing more for the hungry, for the hurting, for the forgotten, for the friendless, and our community. And I don't want you to start with little boy or little girl dreams. I would like to see some adult dreams out of us. Something that really calls us to do more than we think we can do. Something that would ask some sacrifice of ourselves in order to be a part of God's work in God's kingdom. And I think that's possible because it's happened before. If you leave here and drive down toward the river on Broadway, you will come along the backside of a giant hospital that services sick people in our community. Perhaps you know the story of that place, perhaps you don't. But in the 1930s and 40s, during the Depression, during World War II, there were some folks who were part of this church called Immanuel, who envisioned a new hospital built by Baptists to care for the sick men and women of this region. That vision caught fire in this congregation And there are still some people who remember going door to door asking for nickels and dimes and dollars that went to build that hospital. It began because people thought that surely they were capable of doing more. So we can have big adult dreams. We don't have to keep patching things up all the time. We can build something new. We can engage in some new mission or ministry that we've never dreamed or thought of before. But in order for that to happen, Jesus can't keep shaking his head at us and saying, "Oh, you of little faith. You of little faith. You have seen the things that I have done. You can do them too. But hear me clearly. You can do even greater things than I have done." Do we believe it? Well, let's see. Amen.